Hi, my name is Elizabeth. I'm a librarian at the Cosby Library and Community Commons. And in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to make jam using added pectin. So this goes along with my other video that shows you how to make cooked jam where you don't need to add extra pectin. This is another freezer jam recipe, so we are not going to be canning this. It's not going to be shelf stable. You will need to store it either in the refrigerator or in the freezer. And most of these recipes will store in the freezer for up to a year, so this is a really convenient way to make a big batch of jam and have some left over that you can continue to enjoy throughout the year. This is going to be a little bit different from the cooked recipe, and I will tell you more about that as we go along. As I said, we will be using added pectin. This is the common brand that you will find in grocery stores. And the process of making jam is actually a chemical reaction between the pectin, which is naturally occurring in many fruits, and in some fruits in quite large quantities, but some fruits don't have very much, and especially if you don't cook your fruit, the pectin is not going to be released from the fruit. And so these recipes that use this added pectin generally are not cooked. You're just going to mix all the ingredients together, let them sit for a little bit, and then put them into your containers and allow them to set over the course of about 24 hours or so. So in our other video, you'll see that we cook the apples for quite a long time, and that's what helps the jam texture to form. So the pectin is going to react in this case with the sugar that we add and with the acidity that we add with this lemon juice right here. So it is very exact, and in the box you will find the package of pectin, and you will also find some instructions, which I've already taken out here. And these instructions will have a formula for you to follow. For each particular fruit, it will say how much sugar you need, because it is pretty exact how much fruit you need versus and how much sugar you need to add to that fruit in order for the jam to set properly. If your jam doesn't set properly, it's going to be very liquidy, and that's fine. It's still going to be edible. You just might not be able to use it on toast. You might have more of a syrup that might be good as an ice cream topping or a pancake topping, or maybe in your oatmeal. There's still lots of things that you could do with that. So it will still be edible. Don't worry too much about that. You won't necessarily have to throw it away, but it might just not be the correct texture. And this does take a little bit of practice to sort of learn what it is that you're looking for, and especially to get rid of the graininess that sometimes occurs with these no-cook jams, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. This is not the recipe that I made during the virtual class that I gave. So I did give a virtual class about freezer jams, and unfortunately it was right after the big storms, the big ice storms, and so not a lot of people could join us, and so that's why I am making these videos, so that the rest of you can still see what I did during the class and maybe be inspired to try some of these things on your own. I encourage you to watch the cooked jam recipe as well. I will put a video up showing how to make apple jam, because there are a lot of differences and you might have a preference one over the other. I'll talk a little bit more about the differences once we get started. But let me go ahead and get started, because there is a step where we're going to have to sort of wait for things to happen. So here I have 2 cups of cherries. Now I used frozen. I will link to this recipe. So the reason I'm doing this recipe instead of the one that I did during class is because this one I didn't alter at all. So I'm just going to link directly to the recipe that I used. And I also think that she has some really great tips on her website for making good freezer jams. So do go and check out the website that this recipe came from. Now she used fresh cherries. I'm going to use frozen cherries. And you can see that the color is not super great, but that won't really show once our jam is completed. And you can also see that there is some liquid coming out of the cherries since I chopped them up. I just used a food processor to chop them up kind of coarsely. You don't need to worry so much about that liquid. Now I did, after I first defrosted the cherries, and this takes about 2 packages of the cherries that you'll find in the grocery store, I did drain off the excess liquid then. So you don't want just a ton of extra liquid, but the liquid that comes out after you chop your cherries, you can drain off a little bit of that, but you don't have to worry about getting your mixture extremely dry. You may just want to scoop out a little bit of that extra liquid But again, you don't have to worry necessarily about like redraining your fruit after you chop it up. But she does use fresh cherries, and I'm sure the color would actually be better if I used fresh cherries. But when I tested this, the flavor was actually great. I really liked the flavor of this jam, and this is just so much more convenient. And cherries aren't in season right now, so I wouldn't even be able to find them. So this is 2 cups of pitted and chopped sweet cherries, not sour cherries. And here I have 4 1/4 cups of granulated sugar. And yes, that is right, 4 1/4 cups. So in my other recipe that I demonstrated with the apples, we had 2 pounds of apples chopped up, and we added 1 cup of sugar. So this is one of the first differences that you'll notice between the pectin added recipes and the cooked recipes, is that you are going to add a lot of sugar. So if you're ever under the impression that jam is more than fruit flavored sugar, making freezer jam will unfortunately show that this really is a treat food more than anything. But we are going to go ahead and mix this sugar into the cherries. But before we do that, we are going to go ahead and add our lemon juice. So this is the ingredient that's going to add the acidity that is going to help our jam texture to form. So I'm going to go ahead and add in my 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, and you can use bottled or fresh. A lot of people like to use bottled because the acidity is a little bit more consistent. So I'm going to go ahead and add in my lemon juice, and then I'm going to start adding in my sugar. And I know it seems like a ton of sugar. How is this possibly going to turn into jam? But it is really kind of an amazing process. Sugar attracts and absorbs water. The actual molecule does. And so this is actually going to turn into a very liquidy mixture, even though it looks very dry right now. And I'm going to stop for a second and go ahead and stir this. By the way, do this in a microwave safe bowl, because that's one of the tricks that the person who originally wrote this recipe, that's one of the tricks that she uses, is the microwave. Even though this is a no-cook recipe, we're going to bring in that modern convenience here in a minute. So I've got that mixed in. I'm going to add the rest of my sugar. And we're going to mix this well. Now, one of the things I found with some of the pectin recipes that I tried was that some of them foamed a lot, and you had to be really careful when you stirred them not to make the foam even worse. This was especially noticeable with peach, but also with strawberry. I don't know what causes the foaming. It's just little air bubbles is all it is. And it doesn't hurt your jam. It doesn't make it unsafe to eat, but it doesn't look real great either. So I would say stir carefully, not vigorously, but make sure that everything is well combined, and make sure that you're scraping the bottom to make sure nothing's sinking down to the bottom. And then we're just going to leave this mixture like this for about 10 minutes to rest. And it will continue to sort of clear, and that sugar is going to dissolve. So the resting part of all of these no-cook freezer jam recipes is all about letting that sugar dissolve. And so getting rid of that grittiness, getting the sugar to completely dissolve, is one of those issues that a lot of people have with freezer jams. And so some of the tips that I learned were either to use the microwave, which is what we're going to do here, allow the mixture to sit for a long time, so maybe like 30 minutes to an hour, stirring every once in a while. Or you can use sort of a double boiler method. You can put your bowl over a pot of boiling water and very gently heat it that way. You do not want to boil your mixture. Remember, this is not a cooked jam recipe. So you're not trying to cook your mixture, you're just trying to get that sugar to dissolve. And you can maybe see that there are some little bubbles, even in this cherry mixture here, that are bubbling up to the surface. So I'm not a chemist, I'm not sure what's causing that reaction, but do be aware that some fruits bubble a lot. So you can probably tell already that there are differences between this no-cook recipe and the cooked recipe. So we already discussed some of them. There's a lot more sugar in the no-cook recipes. We're not cooking the fruit at all. So that can be an advantage. If you have a fruit that loses some of its nice bright color as it cooks, you're not going to be cooking the fruit at all here. Especially if you're not using frozen fruit, you're going to have those nice bright colors of the strawberries, for example, to sort of brighten up your jam and make it look really pretty. That's why a lot of people maybe like to use the no-cook jams to give as presents, because they're very pretty looking compared to the cooked jams. And then these should take less time. So in my other recipe, my other video, we had to prep the apples. I did that off camera. We had to cook them for about 15 minutes to get them to soften. We added the sugar. We cooked the apples for about another 20 or 25 more minutes. We added some spices. We had to let the apples cook for another 6 or 7 minutes. So all told, you maybe will spend, an hour on a cooked jam recipe versus these no-cook recipes. You might only spend, maybe half that time, maybe 30 minutes. Kind of depends on how much time you have to spend prepping your fruit and what method you use to fully dissolve the sugar. But these can be much, much quicker. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the containers we're going to use to put our jam in. So you can use a canning jar. There is no real reason to. So the thing that makes canning jars special is this lid, and when you actually go through the canning process, this lid forms a seal that keeps out contaminants and prevents spoilage. And so that's what makes a canning jar special. It's also pretty, so if you were going to give these jams as a gift, you might want to choose a canning jar. I wouldn't use one this big, maybe smaller ones. I would also use a wide mouth jar, which doesn't have this indentation here at the top, it just goes straight up like the jam or jelly jars that you maybe have seen at the farmer's market or even at the grocery store. So they're much easier to load and they're much easier to serve out of, and they're also smaller usually. But what I like to use for these, since we're not going to be actually canning, is I like to use these kinds of containers. And so these are various kinds of Ziploc or supposedly containers, but I just use them over and over again. I just make sure to wash them really good each time. So this is a Rubbermaid container. And you can see it has a screw top. I love these kind. Ziploc makes a variety of this kind of container as well. I've used them for other jams, and so I don't have one empty right now. But I love these Ziploc containers or Rubbermaid containers. And then you can also find these sorts of containers. They come in big multi-packs. You can see the lid snaps on real nice. You can even find them in sizes about half this size for really small amounts of jam to keep in the fridge. The jam defrosts quite quickly, and so you can keep your jam in the freezer and then put it out even on the counter to defrost, and it'll defrost, within maybe an hour or so. It defrosts pretty quickly. And so these are the containers that I like to use, especially since these are going in the freezer. If you're just going to be using this for your own use at home, it can be kind of tricky keeping glass containers in the freezer. You might drop them and they might shatter. These kinds of containers can also crack in the freezer. They are freezer safe, but if you drop them or if you try to open them too roughly, they might crack. And in that case, it's a pain. You'll have to put your jam in something else, but it's not dangerous. The plastic is easy to clean up, whereas glass can shatter, and that's not so fun. These containers are a little bit sturdier, which is why I like to use them. And they hold up for a fair amount of time through various washings. So that's a little bit about your different container options. Again, we're going to be stirring this every once in a while. I'm not going to wait the whole 10 minutes here on camera. I'm going to go ahead and let this sit for a while longer, and then we'll come back and we will finish off our jam. Okay, we are back, and you can see that there is some foam forming on the top of this mixture, and hopefully that will dissipate, that will sort of go away in the next step. So the next step, we are going to use one of the tricks that were suggested online for getting rid of the graininess of our mixture, because there is still visible sugar in there. The sugar has not dissolved completely. So what we're going to do is we're going to pop this in the microwave for about 3 minutes. Now I'm going to reduce the power on my microwave just a tad because my microwave is pretty high powered. And if the 3 minutes doesn't do it, then you want to, stir it for a little while, maybe put it in the microwave for another minute or so. Again, the goal here is not to cook this mixture, it's just to get the sugar to dissolve. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, and I'll come back and show you what it looks like when the sugar has totally dissolved. So you don't want to feel any graininess. Ideally, there might be a tiny bit left. We are going to add some boiling water, essentially. That's how we're going to activate the pectin, is we're going to boil it in some water. So we're going to add a little bit of boiling water to this here in a minute. So there will be another chance for that sugar to dissolve, but you want it at least, mostly dissolved by the time you're ready to add the pectin. Okay, my mixture is out of the microwave, and I can see that there's not any cloudiness left, so that's one indication that most of the sugar should have dissolved. I can also kind of feel with my spatula that there aren't very many sugar crystals left. You can sometimes see, depending on the color of your spatula, you can sometimes see if there's sugar crystals still left, or you could just take a small spoon and do a little taste test and make sure there aren't very many, if any, sugar crystals still left in your mixture. So I think I'm good to prepare the pectin. That's going to be the next ingredient. And this is totally normal for this mixture to look this watery, so don't worry about that. Now for the pectin, we are going to follow the instructions that are included with the box. So these will be the same for pretty much any recipe that you make using the added pectin. So that is 3/4 cup of water, and then the package of pectin. So we're just going to add that in. And if you taste the pectin all on its own, it is very lemony, it's very citrusy. So bear that in mind, that when you make something with the added pectin, it is going to add a little bit of tartness, or at least it does to my taste buds. So we're going to mix this thoroughly. And it is a little bit hard to mix, it's kind of chunky, so you want to just kind of break up some of those chunks. And then go ahead and turn the heat on, and you're going to bring this just to a boil. And once it begins to boil, you're going to boil it for about a minute, and then it will be ready to mix in to your fruit and sugar mixture. So most recipes are going to call for 1 packet of pectin, and then some amount of fruit, usually close to 2 cups of fruit, and it will make around 5 cups of jam. Now that's a lot of jam for me, and that's one of the reasons why the pectin recipes for me are perhaps not quite as appealing, because they're all pretty large recipes and they're hard to scale down. So the cooked jams are a little bit easier to make half batches. You will find a few recipes out there that call for double the amount of pectin that we're putting in right now. Those jams tend to be very tart, but they do set up nice and firm, and they require less fruit, and so you end up with less at the end, a more manageable quantity, in my opinion. I have so much jam right now in my freezer from doing all of these experiments, but at least it keeps for a long time. So I do encourage you to at least try both and see which one works for you. So I'm going to go ahead and let this come to a boil. And then again, as soon as it comes to a boil, I'm going to keep stirring it the whole time. As soon as it comes to a boil, I'm going to boil it for 1 minute, and then I will add it to my fruit and sugar mixture. So I will be back once the pectin is ready. Okay, so my pectin mixture here is ready. It's not going to have changed in appearance much, but you should see that it starts to look sort of like a more of a gel than totally liquid. So I'm going to pour this into my fruit and sugar mixture. And the pectin kind of wants to just sink to the bottom. So you want to make sure, most recipes will tell you to stir for 3 minutes, and you definitely want to do that so that the pectin is well incorporated into the fruit and sugar mixture. Otherwise, you will end up with a layer of very firm set jam and a layer of not so firm set, a layer that's more just liquid. So make sure that you do stir this for the full amount of time. And I have my containers already prepared, so this process moves sort of quickly, and it's not that this jam is going to set up very fast, or at least not this particular recipe, but there are a few recipes that will set up sort of quickly. So you do want to be prepared, but if you have to pause for a little bit, it should be okay. Just make sure that you're always scraping the sides, scraping the bottom, and again, never stirring vigorously so that we don't end up with that foam. The cherry is not as bad about foaming, but like I said, the peach and the strawberry, I found it was really difficult to get rid of the little bubbles once they had formed. So make sure everything is very well incorporated. The other thing about these jams is, at least compared to the cooked jam, they were a lot less chunky. So you do end up with a lot of more like jelly consistency with just a few chunks here and there of the fruit, rather than the cooked jams, which are very chunky. So I know I sound very biased when I am explaining the differences between the pectin jams and the cooked jams, but there really are certain things that you can only really do with the pectin added jams, with the no cook jams. There are some fruits, and cherry is actually one of them, that are just not going to make a cooked jam. So if you were going to try to make a cooked cherry jam, I suspect what you'd have to do is you'd have to really make it like an apple cherry jam, because otherwise it just won't set up. All right, this feels really well incorporated. I can actually feel that it's starting to resist me just a tiny bit. So I'm going to go ahead and fill my containers. So I have my containers here, and all I'm going to use is a ladle. And this is sort of hot, so be careful, because you have just added that boiling pectin to it. So it's not real hot, but a little bit. Nothing compared to the cooked jam. So in that way, this is also something that maybe is good to make with kids. There's a lot of websites that will talk about, you know, teaching their kids to make jam this way, because it is safer. You don't have to boil anything for long periods of time. Now with this last bit, I'm going to be a little bit experimental. So what I did with my my blackberry raspberry jam that I made, I actually added in some cocoa powder, and it was just amazing. It was really good on pancakes, on anything sweet, so maybe not something that you would put on toast, but I thought it was really, really good on pancakes and even in my oatmeal. It kind of smelled like Valentine's candy. And so I'm going to try to make anyway, a couple of containers of chocolate cherry, and we're going to see how that turns out. So all I did here was add just kind of a heaping spoonful of cocoa powder, and that's all I did to the raspberry blackberry jam. I might need to switch to my spatula, get out all the lumps. So this is my experiment. Since I already have a lot of cherry jam from trying these recipes out for the program and for the little booklet that I made, which, by the way, you can find the recipes that I gave during the program back on our calendar from when I gave the program back at the end of February 2021. Okay, so that looks well incorporated. It smells really good. We'll see if this sets. Again, I'm not a chemist, so I don't know. I may have just messed up the chemistry here of my jam. So this will be my experiment. And I will come back tomorrow. So I'm going to have to let this set for at least 24 hours. And try not to touch it, so it's real tempting to kind of like mess with it and jiggle it to see if it's setting up. But try to just leave it alone. So I'm going to leave it here to cool for just a little while. And then I'm going to put the lids on, and I'm going to let it do the rest of its setting up on the counter, just at room temperature. And then after the jam is fully set, then I can put it either in the freezer or in the refrigerator, depending on when I'm planning on eating it. So this will keep in the fridge, again, kind of like with the apple jam, it'll keep in the fridge for a couple of weeks, and in the freezer for up to a year. Okay, so I will be back tomorrow to show you how this turned out. So as I said on my apple video, this was one of my pet peeves with the videos that I watched, is that they never went back and showed you what the final results of the jam were. So I will be back to show you, hopefully, that our jam has set and what your final jam should look like if you choose to make this cherry recipe, either with my little creative addition or without. All right, here we are about 24 hours later. My jam has been sitting out on the counter, setting, and it's probably as fully set as it's ever going to be. So I'll show you what that looks like. And this is specifically for this cherry jam. So remember that I mentioned that pectin is naturally occurring in fruits. And so here's our cherry jam. You can see that it is still quite loose compared to like a store-bought jam. Cherry has very little naturally occurring pectin, so the only thing that's helping this to set is whatever pectin we added. So there's that. And now my chocolate version. And I can tell that I did not clean, there we go, the rims well enough. So here's my chocolate version, and I did test a little bit of that earlier. So pretty much the same, it looks like, as far as consistency is concerned. Maybe a little bit looser. I do like the taste. I think it tastes good, and really like it on waffles, for example. These are chocolate waffles, which is why they look so dark. And then just for comparison, I defrosted the blackberry and raspberry jam that I had made, that I added cocoa to. And you can see, I think already, even before I take it out, how much more set this is. And that is mostly due to the fact that berries have a lot more pectin in them, naturally. And so you've got the pectin that's in the berries, plus the pectin that we added, helping this to set. And so it is going to be a lot firmer. So there's going to be a lot of variety in these kinds of jams, and even in cooked jams as well, just depending on the amount of pectin that's present and how it reacts with the other components of your mixture. But I hope this gives you an idea of where you might want to go with your experiments, and I hope you enjoy trying out both the cooked jams and these no-cook jams. I think they're both worth exploring and seeing which one works best for you and the kinds of fruits you like. And thank you for joining me.